We often imagine the Middle Ages as an age of knights and kings, grand castles and epic battles. But behind the stories of glory and honor lies a far darker truth. If you lived in the year 1300, your life would be short, brutal, and fragile. There were no hospitals, no antibiotics, and no safety nets. And while war and violence played a role, they weren't the only dangers. In fact, many people met their end in ways we'd consider horrifying or absurd today. So buckle up, because in this video we're uncovering the terrifying truth. How did people really die in the Middle Ages? Let's start with the obvious: war. Yes, people did die in battle, brutally. A swing of a sword could end your life. A single arrow could pierce your neck or gut. But most battles weren't glorious duels between knights. They were chaotic, muddy, and cruel. Foot soldiers were often poorly trained and wore little to no armor. And even if you survived the clash, your real danger began afterward. Infections, gangrene, and untreated wounds killed more soldiers than swords did. If you were stabbed and your wound became infected, there were no antibiotics. Barber surgeons might cut off your arm or let you rot. Some died from fever, others from tetanus or blood loss days after fighting. And peasants caught in the middle of wars? They were often slaughtered, starved, or conscripted, dying for someone else's cause. Now we move to the greatest killer of them all: disease. In 1347, the Black Death arrived in Europe. It swept through towns and villages like wildfire. In just 4 years, it killed over 25 million people, up to half the population. Victims developed swollen black buboes, fevers, vomiting blood, and usually died within days. People abandoned their own families, cities were silent, and corpses piled up in the streets. But the Black Death wasn't the only horror. Some believed the plague came from bad air or planetary alignment. Others blamed the poor, foreigners, or even witches. And treatments? People burned herbs, applied dung to wounds, drank mercury, or tried bloodletting to balance their humors. None of it worked. Imagine trying to survive on spoiled grain, bark soup, or animal bones. In the Middle Ages, famine was a constant fear. From 1315 to 1317, Europe suffered the Great Famine. It rained non-stop for years. Crops rotted, livestock drowned, grain stores emptied, thousands died. Not by violence, but by simply wasting away. But famine didn't only strike during disasters. For poor peasants, chronic malnutrition was normal. Bread was dark, rough, and full of dirt or mold. Protein was rare, vitamins were scarce. Children grew up weak. Bones broke easily, wounds didn't heal. Many simply died from being too poor to survive. Justice in medieval times was terrifying. There were laws, but no mercy. Steal bread, you could lose your hand. Speak against the church, you could be burned at the stake. Suspected of witchcraft, death, even without proof. Some punishments were meant to kill. Others were just as deadly by accident. Executioners weren't always skilled. Sometimes it took multiple swings to sever a head. Some people burned for hours while crowds watched, and worst of all, sometimes people were innocent. But in a world of fear and rumor, innocence didn't matter. You didn't need a war, a plague, or a crime to die in the Middle Ages. Daily life itself was deadly. Children died often. There were no car seats, no vaccines, and no safe drinking water. People worked from age 5, and by 30 they were often broken, toothless, or blind. There were no real doctors. Midwives and herbalists did their best, but without modern knowledge, most wounds meant death or amputation. Religion was everywhere, and sometimes it killed. People were taught to fear sin more than death. They fasted to extremes, self-punished, or joined flagellant cults that whipped themselves bloody. Witch trials spread across Europe. Old women healers or suspicious neighbors were hanged or burned based on rumors alone. Even dreams were dangerous. If your vision went against church teachings, you might be accused of heresy. And because medicine failed, people turned to saints, relics, or miracle cures, which often made things worse. Faith gave people hope, but in the wrong hands, it could also bring death. For women, childbirth was one of the most dangerous events in life. There were no clean tools, no pain relief, no concept of bacteria. A woman giving birth might bleed out or contract a deadly infection from the midwife's unwashed hands. Or the baby might be stuck, and both mother and child would die. Some women gave birth 10 to 15 times in their lives, hoping a few children would survive. It was a brutal lottery. For medieval women, death was a shadow in every pregnancy. There's one more type of death we rarely talk about. The unseen, the unrecorded, the forgotten. People who died from mental illness, isolation, or suicide. The homeless, the disabled, the outcasts. They vanished quietly from history. Medieval society didn't understand depression or trauma. There was no therapy, just prayer or punishment. Many suffered silently, without comfort, without care, and without a name in any book. So how did people die in the Middle Ages? They died from disease, war, starvation, superstition, and childbirth. They died in silence, in pain, and often too young. But they also lived with incredible strength. Every day they survived was a small miracle. Their lives were short, but their stories built the world we live in. If this video gave you a new perspective on the past, drop a like, share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into forgotten history. Because the best way to honor those who came before us and is to never forget them. See you in the next story.